Welcome everyone, and I'm delighted today to be here with Charline. It's great to have you, Charline. So the one and only Charline Drappier, it's a pleasure to have you. You are the 8th generation of Drappier Champagne, and your family has been in Champagne, set up in Urville in the Côte d'Ivoire since 1808. You've got over 200 years of history and lots of wonderful things to tell us today. So I'm really, really excited that we're going to have a chat. We're going to have a look at 4 different champagnes. I know we've got people tuning in from all over the world, from Australia, from Japan, from France, and of course from Singapore, where I am, and where we have some beautiful bottles to taste. So today we have 4, and not everyone has the same bottles because there are some that are very limited today. But we're going to try and share everything with you over the next 60 minutes. So it's really, really exciting to be here. Charline, you are in the Côte d'Ivoire right now, and you're right next to Urville. So tell us a little bit about you, the house, and your 200 years of history.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for joining me from Australia and Singapore. I haven't had the chance to come lately, but I'm really happy to get the opportunity to tell you a bit more about this champagne, and especially with some champagnes that we have just been releasing. So it's really exciting for me to show them to you. So really, thank you, and thank you, Lucy, for setting this up. So yes, to tell you a bit more about Drappier, you have to understand first our location. So Lucy, you just mentioned that I'm right now very close to Urville, which is not really in the heart of the Côte d'Ivoire, but on the very southeast corner of the Côte d'Ivoire, which is kind of the edge of the appellation Champagne. Côte d'Ivoire is in the Aube, which is 150 kilometers south of Reims. So Champagne is a big stretch. People tend to forget it, thinking that everything's around Reims and Epernay, but we are actually halfway between Reims and Beaune, to give you an idea. So the Burgundy influence is really, really important in Champagne, and I'll get back to that later. So yes, Drappier settled 200 years ago in Urville when my ancestors started to farm grapes. And we'll get to that story later too. But really, our identity is the result of the history and the geography of Urville, because of the varietal that we have, mainly Pinot Noir. We'll talk about Pinot Noir later too, and the terroir that we have. That's quite different than in the Marne Valley, for example. So do you want me to focus on the terroir first?
Yeah, I'd love to hear about the terroir, because you guys are, definitely very Burgundian in terms of what Champagne is today. And it seems to be that it's becoming more and more popular style, not only to work like the Burgundians do with barrels, and I'm sure you're going to tell us all about the super, super special barrels you have, but also to really highlight that in the terroir. So tell us about your Kimmeridgian clay. I believe the soil is predominantly.
Yes, chalk. Well, chalk and clay, but yeah, it's mainly limestone. Actually, it's limestone. So because we are located at the edge of the Parisian basins, and that's a small drawing that I did. I don't know if you'll see, but if you take Paris, which I drew with an Eiffel Tower, and you take the Marne is closer to Paris when Urville is farther from Paris. So the Paris was at the center of a sedimentary basin many million years ago, and this the terroir of the Marne is actually chalk, but more recent chalk, when we are on a layer that's more ancient than the one you find in the Marne, which is Kimmeridgian limestone. And Kimmeridgian limestone is an era from the Jurassic Kimmeridgian. It's very dense in oysters, microorganisms that used to live in the sea. So we share the same terroir with Chablis. So if you're familiar with the Chablis wines, and I'm sure most of you are, you'll see a lot in common between our wines and Chablis, even though we're predominantly Pinot Noir and not Chardonnay. So it's interesting because this Kimmeridgian limestone makes our Pinot Noir very different than the Pinot Noir you would find in the Marne, because of how harsh, tough, extremely dense the stone is. So I always start talking about that because it sets it really apart from the rest of the Marne, and also Mongueux. Mongueux is a different terroir in the Côte des Bar, but it's mainly clay and chalk. When really in the Côte des Bar and in Urville especially have Kimmeridgian limestone. Also because we're a little bit southern, we have a different climate, which is not only a warmer climate. Yes, we do have a little 1 degree of difference, which makes a big difference when it comes to vine growing. But also we are at the highest altitude of the Champagne appellation, which is not high. It's only 300 meters high. But
higher than the mountain.
Yes,
higher than the mountain.
It's actually higher than the Montagne de Reims, which is kind of strange. But when you're on the top of that hill, you also find more difference of temperature between night and day. So which is why we're also able to keep nice acidity in our wine. But it's quite steep because there's 100 meters from the bottom of the village and the height. And because of that steepness, we get a lot of sun during the day. So it's an interesting micro environment for our vines in around Urville that we will maybe start talking about with the Brut Nature.
Yes, and what I love about what I love about all Drappier wines is that you have an amazing story in regards to the grape varietals that you use. And now we'll talk about the older grape varietals later, but I would love to hear about how Pinot Noir became part of your core identity and what the Drappier family did to make Pinot Noir such a big thing versus Gamay, which used to be planted all over the south.
Yeah. Do you want the long version or the short version? I'll try to do a little bit of both.
Tell us all the details.
Okay.
All the gossip.
The story goes back to the 12th century. So you have to imagine the monk that is still very important in the story of the Aube and in the story of Drappier, who's Saint Bernard. So Saint Bernard was a Cistercian monk. The Abbaye de Cîteaux was located, and it's still, even though it mostly looks like ruins now, but very close to the Côte de Nuit. And this monk left his own abbey to settle in his own abbey, and he took Pinot Noir with him to Champagne, and he built this abbey that is called Clairvaux or Clarévalis that we'll talk about later. And he is really the man that planted Pinot Noir in the Côte des Bar, and we're talking about 800 years ago. And that's thanks to him that we have Pinot Noir in Champagne, but that's also due to him that, especially in our region, because Clairvaux is located 10 kilometers from Urville, from our estate, we were Pinot Noir driven for centuries and centuries. And well, there was a lot of different varietals, but Pinot Noir was really the varietal that was dominant, because back in the days, they were making red wine. They were making red wine for the mass, and they were selling red wine all over Europe. They were really, really powerful. They're very important monks. They had hundreds of sister abbey around Europe, and Pinot Noir was the king variety back in the days. And what happened? There was many waves of different varietals and many waves of accidents. The main accident was the phylloxera, obviously, at the beginning of the 12th century. Pinot Noir is a very fragile variety. Well, everything was completely broken, and in the beginning of the 12th century, they started replanting Gamay. because it was easier, more rustic, and Gamay was replanted and was the dominant variety up until the war, approximately the war. And my great-grandfather, who was nicknamed Père Pinot, is really the man who was defending the legacy of the Pinot Noir in the Côte des Bar, and said that if we wanted to go up in quality, we had to take away the Gamay and replant the Pinot. And he was fighting and with all the interprofession to replant the Pinot Noir, and he succeeded, because now the Pinot Noir is well, the Aube region is planted 70% of Pinot Noir, because that's the history, and Drappier is also planted 70% of Pinot Noir. And really, it's interesting to see that started with my great-grandfather Père Pinot. My grandfather and my grandmother both really worked around the Pinot Noir, even though they were making a blend with Pinot Noir. But my father took that heritage and turned it into 100% Pinot Noir. I know I have it as a magnum. I plan to celebrate with my friends later. That's why I took a magnum.
That's awesome. The perfect size. Perfect size for two when one person isn't drinking. That's what we say, right?
Yes, exactly.
I love the color in this, and I mean you can tell immediately that it's definitely high end Pinot because of the slightly pink color that it has.
Yes.
But I believe this is aged about 4 or 5 years in the cellars.
Yes.
And what I love also is it is brut nature, so zero dosage.
Yes, so that's the story with the Brut Nature. Well, first I want to mention what you just said about the colors. Very important. We call it in a Drappier slightly a copper color, copper tainted, because it has this hint of pink or warm orange. It's hard to exactly define, but you can tell, at least at Drappier, what is 100% Pinot Noir, what's 100% Chardonnay. The reason also for that is that we don't discolor our wine. So that was something that was very usual a couple of years ago. Fortunately, it's becoming more and more rare. But people used to discolor. Do you say discolor in English? I don't know. But take the color away with charcoal to make it look more light, because back in the days, clients who expected champagne to be very pale. Good thing that things have changed, and now you can totally have the natural color in your glass. So yeah, Pinot Noir, and now the story with the Blanc de Noir and the Brut Nature. So as I was saying, my father took this heritage. He did his winemaker studies in Beaune. So he didn't study in Champagne, which is quite rare for a Champagne winemaker. Usually Champagne winemakers study in Champagne. But he did his studies in Beaune, and he really learned to work with Pinot Noir as a red wine. And he said there is so much potential in Urville in making a Blanc de Noir. That was in the early 90s. Pinot Noir, Blanc de Noir were not fashionable at all. It's interesting to see now that you see Blanc de Noir popping everywhere. And he started working on the Blanc de Noir, and he did not think it worked with the dosage. And this is when he started making no dosage. And again, we're talking about the early 90s, when also no one had ever heard, well, there were a couple of low dosage, no dosage, but even no dosage was really rare. And it really was the genesis of this cuvée, is that he thought Pinot Noir in Urville doesn't work with dosage because of that ripeness that we have in Urville, and the terroir, Kimmeridge limestone. It brings so much freshness, minerality to Pinot Noir that on 100% Pinot Noir, if you add dosage, it makes it really look really heavier than it should be. And this is when this is how the Brut Nature really started to be released, like something really strange for the days, and now it's become one of our most famous cuvées. So it's an interesting story.
It's beautiful. It does have, you can distinctly tell that it is Pinot Noir because of the weight on the palate, but it does have still a beautiful acidity. And I can see what you mean about, you know, adding sugar to this, where you'd lose its lightness. I see what you mean.
Yes, yes. So we want that airy feeling. That's, oh, by the way, cheers.
Cheers, something.
You have the perfect glass, Lucy. I'm sorry, I don't have the perfect glass. I'm not at home, so I did with what I had, which is a Drappier glass, but a smaller one, the one that that is more of a
beautiful. We've seen plenty of different types of glasses, and that one's excellent. So I mean, as long as you're enjoying it, that's what counts, right?
Exactly.
I've been very lucky to use some Riedel performance glasses. What are your thoughts on glassware, Charline? What is the perfect glass? Do you go sometimes all the way to burgundy glasses or larger bowl glasses for your champagne? What do you do?
Yes, we do. The one that we love the most and that we use when we can is the Jamais glass. So it's a glass that's been designed by the sommelier of L'Écrière, which is a Michelin star restaurant in Reims. He's really like a very knowledgeable sommelier, and he designed a glass that was kind of a mix between a wine glass. I'm sorry I don't have it here, but it's
I think it's available for purchase. If you're very kind in Singapore, you can buy it through Galliena or Wine Family.
Yes.
They are stunning. They're beautiful tulip flutes.
Yes, exactly. They are tulip flute, but very wide and pointy. So I love burgundy glass, and when I'm at the restaurant, I would obviously ask my champagne to be served in a burgundy glass rather than a champagne flute. The only thing is that you might lose a little bit of bubbles because of the flat end. When these especially designed for champagne glasses, you have I don't know if you say that in English, but a départ de bulle. It's like a start of the
nucleus, the
nucleus.
Yeah, where the bubbles start to nucleate. Yes. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. So these are for me the perfect glasses. But you don't really have to use them for even for Brut Nature. It's obviously something that you can take when you're having some Grand Cendré or something.
So your Pinot Noir is obviously a more food-friendly style, a lot more versatile with food. What would you pair with this? What's your preferred recommendation?
Oh, it's interesting. Well, there's always the traditional pairings, like oysters, because it's interesting, again, because of the terroir. We're talking about a terroir, very dense in oyster, so that salinity, almost iodic, you will find it in the wine, which is unexpected from a Pinot Noir driven champagne, because you expect Pinot Noir to be very fruit forward, which is true, especially on the nose, on the first palate. But then the structure is really almost like sea-like. So it always works very well with oysters or anything crudo. So I love it with ceviche, carpaccio, scallops, things that have a nice acidity. But the most surprising pairing that we do at home is with tartare, with beef tartare. So it's interesting, not with cooked beef, but with beef tartare, because you have a kind of a umami protein flavor that works really well with the high acid and very dry champagne. So it was the like great surprise when I tried that with my father, and we do replicate that a couple of times at home. French fries, tartare, and Brut Nature.
It sounds amazing. It sounds amazing. Tartare and champagne. I think people often neglect the potential there is for red meat and champagne to be paired. Yeah. And tartare is, seems like the perfect match.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, there are so many things to say about Drappier, and I could be sitting here asking you questions for hours and hours and hours. But one of the really exciting things, and it kind of leads us on to our second wine, is that you guys are not only working to transform your, so you have 65 hectares that you own, transforming that to organic, but you're also the first ever carbon neutral house. So tell us about that.
Yes, yes. So yes, starting with the vine, because obviously that's the most important asset when you're a winemaker. We have 65 hectares, which is quite big for a small family. And then we have another 50 hectares that my brother Hugo. So I have two brothers, both into the production aspect. My brother Hugo, who's 29, is really responsible for the change into the carbon neutral footprint and also the conversion, the organic conversion. So we've been sustainable for many, many, many years, but it was quite a step until we moved to organic, especially when we have now 17 hectares organic, which is quite big if you're familiar with and you are with the conditions of growth in Champagne. There's many, many reasons why a lot of producers haven't risked to be organic. It's really tough. So we're now one of the largest organic estate in Champagne, having 17 hectares accredited, and we're moving towards 100%. So my brother is really extreme in his position. He really wants to be a game changer in the organic landscape in Champagne. But what my father thought and what we believed as a family is that it's too restrictive to think about environment footprint and only take the vineyards, because Champagne production is complex, is long, it takes a lot of water. So we took the holistic approach, trying to tackle everything we do at each step of the Champagne process, reducing our footprint. So you can start from the bottle you have in your hand is 15% lighter than a regular Champagne bottle. So when you ship it, it's not as heavy. We produce 75% of our electricity, so we have photovoltaic panels everywhere. We use electric tractors, which is quite unusual. We use electric cars. So every little things we could do to achieve a carbon neutral footprint. And I believe it's quite an unusual stand in Champagne. We're actually the only carbon neutral wine estate in France so far, because I know a lot of people are now getting interested in it. But yeah, it's a little too restrictive to think, oh, my Champagne must be clean because it's organic. No, it's a lot more complex than that, and it's as complex as Champagne is. So we thought it would be interesting to extend it to the whole Champagne process.
What I found really interesting is JC, who's based here in Singapore, said he came to visit you in Erville, and when he arrived, Michel, your father, welcomed him and said, "Oh, where have you driven from?" He said, "From Reims." Okay, and so he went and calculated the kilometers, and then he offset the carbon of JC's trip from Reims to Erville.
Yes, that's what he does. Yes. And every trip we make, that doesn't surprise me for my father. Yeah, we try to minimize everything because that's we believe that's the future. You have to have a really minimum, and our objective is to be actually a carbon positive. So we will produce more electricity than we actually use.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Everyone needs to follow in your example, Charline. That's excellent. Now, this Clarivalis is a new cuvee which has recently been launched, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe it's from the 17 hectares of organic vineyards.
Yes.
So these are vineyards that not only are grown in organic conditions and certified, but also you till them with your own horses, which I believe your other brother.
My other brother. Yes. Yeah. Antoine. So I mentioned Hugo. He's my younger brother. He's 28, and then there's Antoine. He's my youngest brother. He's 23, and he's not into the wine at all. I think he rejected that. He's the man. He's the man of the wild, and he's really much into animals and plants and all of this. And and he said, I want to join you, but I'm really not interested in the business aspect or the winemaking. But he's always worked with horses since he was 14, and now he has 2 horses that he uses to farm our vineyards. So not all of it, because it's not possible. We calculated that if we wanted to farm everything with horses, we would need to have 35 horses.
Wow.
Yeah, so, but he does all the organic, because it helps having a closer work to the plant, and most importantly, less erosion, because the tractor is heavy. So we choose the parcels that he works on depending on all of that. So it's complex, depending on the steepness, depending on the risk of erosion. So it's a big labor. My grandfather was crazy when my brother said, I want to reintroduce the horses, because he spent part of his life trying to buy his first tractor. For him, my grandparents were really pioneer. They were the first winemakers in the Aube. They were quite poor farmers, and before, it took him 10 years before he bought his first tractor. So it was interesting to see that intergenerational discussion, quite a heated discussion about why would you reintroduce horses when I spent all that energy. So it's interesting to see my generation coming with all that, digging in old ideas to transform it with modern ways, which is also the case with the old varietals that we'll talk about later. And Clarivalis, so that was really more of my brothers and my job to design the wine of my generation. And it's interesting because even in this wine, we reintroduced Blanc Vrai, which is the Champagne name for Pinot Blanc, because my brother wanted to pay a tribute to the varietals that were always in the vines from my grandparents. Back in the day, they were not really sure about how to vinify separately. So the Pinot Blanc was, to be honest, blend before the press. They didn't know. And he thought it was interesting to reintroduce that kind of old way of mixing grapes before they were even vinified. And it's interesting because it really adds something different. The fact that it has Chardonnay, Meunier, and Blanc Vrai, it's a bit more vibrant. It's more on the light floral notes than our Brut Nature, which is more focused on a deep, fruity structure and mineral champagne. So it's quite exciting to see this taking what the previous generations made and using it with our own interpretation. And I didn't talk about the name, but Clarivalis is the name of the abbey I told you about earlier, which is Clairvaux. Clarivalis is the Latin name of Clairvaux, and it really is also paying a tribute to the Cistercian heritage. And obviously, back in the days, they were not farming with any pesticide, so it's like farming like the monks did.
Good on you. I love it. I love the idea behind it, but it's also got an incredibly pronounced nose. Absolutely stunning. Now, I believe that this is aged in, so I think you may have mentioned it, you have Cistercian cellars underneath the Drappier house.
Yes. So for those of you who've visited already, yes, we have cellars that were built in 1152. And it's quite unusual, very old cellars for Champagne. And one of the 2 remaining from that Cistercian days, most of them were destroyed. And it ages in the Cistercian cellars. That's the point. Yes, it's a loop. It's interesting because the monks were really able to build cellars that are not deep, but that have the perfect environment for wine aging. They're dug straight in the limestone and have a perfect condition of temperature for wine aging. It's crazy to believe that these were built 800 years ago.
And in regards to putting them in the cellars, I believe we have a disgorgement date, the bottom of the bottle here, 10/19. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Beautiful.
When was yours disgorged?
I think it says November 19.
Yep.
Yeah, DG 10/19.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the little, you have to know it now, all of you know it, but we put the disgorgement date on all our bottles. It's the last 4 digits that are on that are engraved on the glass. Which is good. November, 8 months of disgorgement, it has time to settle. It's not a Brut Nature, it actually is an extra brut because of how fresh it is. So we're not only, you know, Brut Nature oriented. We know it needs some dosage sometimes. So it's 4 grams, 3.5 to 4 grams, which is a nice touch to this quite vibrant and fresh style. What do you think?
I think it's absolutely stunning. It's certainly a lot more tropical and a lot more citrus than the Blanc de Noir for sure.
Yeah.
But pretty rare to come across, I believe, because this is only how many bottles do you make of the Claret?
That would be a little over 10,000 a year. Not much.
So pretty small. And when you released the Claret, you also released a cuvee called Pepinot, Father Pinot, in honor of your granddad, great granddad.
Yes.
And you also released a Trois
Yes.
Fromenteau.
Yes.
Pinot Gris, which are also very rare, but I believe if you ask nicely in Singapore, you can get your hands on some of those.
Yeah, we it was like the limited edition of our first work as a new generation, and as with the Father Pinot, we wanted really to pay tribute to the heritage of Pinot, and we reinterpreted it with blending the 4 Pinots of Champagne, so Pinot Gris, Pinot Noir, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Meunier. And it's an interesting 25% of each Pinot blend. And that is one of the results of our research on Pinot Gris. So that was the 7th varietal that we reintroduced in 2013, which we made 100%. That's the Trop, which is called Trop because the rules of Champagne forbid us to call it Fromenteau. So I actually had a label ready with Fromenteau that I showed it on preview during the Printemps du Champagne, and someone posted it on Instagram, and then I got an email from the Interprofession telling me that I was not allowed to say it was Fromenteau, even though I said that that's what it is. So it was an interesting debate, and in the end, I was not allowed to call it Fromenteau. So we had to remove it from the label and find a fun play on words, and we called it Trop. So.
Which translates to I need too much, or how would you translate that?
Or never enough, sort of I need too much, yes. So it's a contrepétrie in French.
Makes sense.
But I still believe that maybe one day we'll be able to call it Fromenteau, because that's what it is, 100% Pinot Gris Champagne.
Yeah. So tell us about the cépage d'antan, or the forgotten varietals. Why do we call them the cépage d'antan? And are they making a comeback? I mean, obviously you guys are doing some amazing things with them, which is super exciting. But do you think people will be following in your footsteps? And why?
That's interesting. So I do have the bottle here open and empty, because we have so little that I am not going to taste it today. We produce only 2,000 bottles a year, so it's a very, very small production at home. So obviously, I won't taste it today. But the forgotten varietals, well, each of those varietals have a different story, a complicated story. But if I was to try to sum it up, most of them were given up because of how hard they were to get ripe And obviously, I saw a question. I don't know if it was a question that you received from someone who's watching us today, that will they make a comeback because of the climate change, which is a possibility. So, for instance, the Arban. Arban is really a varietal that is endemic, and do you say endemic, indigenous, or from the Aube, indigenous, from the Aube. So it's really something that we wanted to keep because it's the local, very, very local heritage, not only on Champagne, but of the Bar-sur-Aube arrondissement. So it's very local, and we actually today own 75% of the Arban in Champagne. And it's interesting because this varietal, my brother is a member of all the research committee on all those old varieties. We don't know who are the parents of these varietal. It's a complete, we don't know where it comes from. We believe it was brought by the Romans, which is interesting, which is why we call this Quatuor, which means four in Latin, because these are all varieties that are pre-Burgundy, so pre-Chardonnay, pre-Pinot Noir. And the Arban has a very, very high level of acidity, which is the reason why it was given away, because they had cooler climate, and they were also picking the grapes earlier, avoiding the risk that today we can take, because today we have technology, we can take the risk to wait a few days later and wait really until the grape is ripe. When back in the days, Arban was giving fruit that you would harvest at 7 or 8. So not to be too technical, but this is really, really, really high acidity. So my grandparents gave it away for that reason. Now we're able to pick the grapes almost every year because of the climate that we have. And it brings a nice structure, acidity to the wine, which is in this wine, for those of you who are tasting it, really the backbone of this wine is the Arban. Very green. And the problem also of this variety is that it has different times. On the same bunch, you have berries getting ripe at different moments. So you have to sort the berries before press, which is another reason why it was very complex and was given up. And the other reason why it was given up is that the yields are lower than Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And Champagne is used to have quite high yields. So it's not really common to say, or to somehow lose money, because you're growing a grape that will give less grape. But with that being said, we believe it will always be complementary grape, bringing diversity to Champagne. But even at Drappier, we don't believe it will take the place of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, because Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and Pinot Meunier have an elegance, a depth that that at least with our knowledge of aging, we don't find yet with those varieties. We find them interesting when you blend them in a certain ways, which is what I think is the complexity of the Quatuor, because the Quatuor is 25% of each variety. So when you combine all of those different characteristics of all those grapes, you end up with what I believe is a very elegant, a very complex Champagne. But I think it's still hard to believe that many producers will start making 100% Arban or 100% Pinot Blanc. Because, maybe we will, who knows? Because with all the with the knowledge that we've acquired through the past decades, we will know how to make a better Champagne with quite a rustic grape. But the challenge is, for me, and we see it as a duty to keep this heritage of Champagne and to try to use it with our with our more recent technology and knowledge. And I think that's what we've tried to do with the Quatuor, is with our knowledge of climate, with our knowledge of winemaking, how can we turn a very rusty grape into something interesting? So that was the point of making this Quatuor. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that was a great answer. It's really, really fascinating, and I think there are more and more people now who are really interested in exploring those varietals. If I'm not mistaken, so the three main varietals, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier, make up 99.7% of the total region of Champagne. And that 0.3% is the other four authorized grapes. So no other grapes are authorized, I believe, in Champagne.
No.
But if you calculate 0.3% of 34,000 hectares and a bit, that's less than 200 hectares. So it's tiny. It's tiny.
It's tiny, and out of those 200 hectares, there are, I believe, half of it is Pinot Blanc, which is Blanc Vrai, which is also more common than the Petit Méliès, the Arban, and the Pinot Gris.
Yeah.
So yeah, Pinot Blanc was more common, and it's still more common. You would see a couple of producers still making quite a lot of Pinot Blanc only Champagne. But yeah, we have our total of all varietals is 4 hectares, which is a lot for Champagne. Yeah, yeah. We chose the parcels that got most sun, because it needs sun to get ripe, and they're also organic. So Quatuor is organic. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Is it my Glassware? It's not quite as fine, and it's not fine and filtered. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. All of them are unfined and unfiltered, but you might, yeah. Do you have a little bit more cloudiness in this one?
That's a tad, yeah, just a little bit. I might top myself up just to be sure, but it's almost,
that's a good reason. That's a good reason, Lucy, to check.
To be sure. Yeah, absolutely. It certainly is incredibly expressive, and I think that's something that kind of leads to my next question, is that you guys at Drappier are not only famous for making ridiculously large bottles, but also famous for being able to make those ridiculously large bottles without transvasage, so without putting them into, taking smaller bottles and putting them in, because you use very little or no sulfur. And so this, I mean, the fact that it's so expressive, you know, jumping out of the gates as it is partly due to the no sulfur. Can you tell us about your policy there and how that may be changing in Champagne?
Yes, that's another research area that we've been exploring. Well, you mentioned 2 researches that we've been conducting over the past 40 years, which is large format and low sulfur. So starting with low sulfur, my father's really sensitive to sulfur, so he's not allergic or anything. But because Champagne 50 years ago was just not paying attention at all to the sulfur they were using, he had really bad experience with really high sulfur Champagne, and he just thought, why don't we try to use less? So that was the idea. It was not like, oh, I want to make a no sulfur Champagne. It was like, I want to see if we can find a way to use less sulfur, which is something that started 30 years ago. So he started at the vines, started sorting the grapes before the press. Then we built the winery completely by gravity. So if you come to the estate, you will see the estate is dug in the hill, and we put the grapes at the very top of the hill, and then everything is gravity driven. So as you may know, sulfur is a preservative. It prevents the wine from oxidation. So every time you pump, you add air, and you add a risk of harming the wine and making it look tired. I don't know if that makes sense, but a tired wine. So everything was built at the winery a long time ago to avoid the use of sulfur. So we don't pump at any time of the process. The wine flows. And at every step, temperature of fermentation, etc. He's worked in a way that we could use low sulfur and to no sulfur at all Champagne. So now we have one of the lowest of sulfur possible in Champagne, which you should not be able to tell. So that's something also that we've always wanted, is that if we make no sulfur Champagne, we don't want it to be like a weird cloudy, oxidized wine. We're still quite traditional in a way that we believe our varietal will express better if there is no flaw. So we try not to use sulfur, but not at the price of the wine. It's really rare, if not absolutely never, that we have a flaw because of a lack of sulfur. And about 15 years ago, we pushed it to a non-added sulfur adult champagne. And it's pretty much the same. You should not be able to tell there's no sulfur. People who are really into no sulfur wine will believe, and it's possible that it's a bit more open in terms of aroma, because as sulfur is also preservative, it can also freeze a little bit the flavors and prevent them from flourishing. So the non-added sulfur champagne, which is actually a version of the Brut Nature, is a bit more open and wild in its aromatic profile. So that's the story with the non-sulfur. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely. So as a bit of a reference, we're sitting here about 20-30 milligrams per litre. If I'm not mistaken, 150, is sometimes it's completely normal.
Sometimes 150 is authorized, but that's the maximum. And what you would find now in champagne would be 60, 70. So it's a third of what's used usually in champagne. But champagne has made great effort in bringing those addition of sulfur down. But yeah, we try 3 times less than most champagnes, which is why you shouldn't have any headache even after a magnum by yourself.
Challenge accepted. So speaking of oxidation, I know you guys have not only some beautiful, do you call them poudre, the enormous barrels, but you also have one of, I believe, the 5 Taranto ovum barrels that are in Champagne, which is absolutely stunning. It looks like an egg. And if I'm not mistaken, has the golden ratio, the golden proportions, so that it keeps the lees in
suspension,
floating. Yeah. So tell us about your use of oak, and tell us about the ovum and what you're using that for.
Yeah. So that leads me to the last one tasting, because this one has a little bit of oak aging. So we use mainly oak foudre, which are huge oak barriques. So they are like usually between 3,000 to 5,000 liters capacity of old oak. So most of our foudre are between 5 to 20-year-old. So you shouldn't find, at least at Drappier, any oak taste nor oxidation style. We try to use oak only for aging, so we don't ferment, neither for the first fermentation nor malolactic fermentation. So by the way, I forgot to mention that, but malolactic fermentation is done all through the range. We don't block malolactic fermentation, because malolactic fermentation, you block it with sulfur. So yeah, so we let the wine go through malolactic fermentation. Anyway, so that was so going back to wood, oak, old oak 200 years ago, Forêt de Troncel, which is a very famous old forest in the center of France, and we age usually between 1 to 2 years part of our vintages. So this will be the case of the Grand Cendré. And we have a very exciting project coming up, which is the ovum. So you just mentioned the egg shape. So I know there was also a question about what are the new projects. So this is also one of the new projects. Not
Let
new
us in
in the way that
on the secrets, Charline. What is yet to be released?
So the ovum was definitely something that we've been waiting for almost 9 years now. So could you imagine, because Champagne has just such a long, everything we do is just for not only 10 years ahead, but the next generation. So when we made the decision, that was when I was not even working with my family, to buy and to work on with the H-shaped barrels. It was in 2010. And you have to wait 10 years before you actually see the result of this wine. So this new cuvée will be a Grand Cendré, which is a single parcel that we'll talk about later, but only aged for 2 years in an H-shaped barrel. So as you mentioned, we're looking for this balance between natural circulation of the wine and a natural material, because you would find egg in cement or clay, but very rarely you find it in oak. And with oak, you combine the natural material that helps the wine breathe and the shape, which makes the lees always in suspension. And our plan was to release the 2012 vintage this year or maybe next year. But because the wine was kept so fresh and so balanced, we decided to keep it for a little longer. So we still don't know when it will be released. It really will depend on how the wine behaves. And the wine is now in the bottle for 7 years, maybe 2021, 2022, we don't know.
Wonderful. The Grand Cendré has an incredible elegance to it. So you said aged 2 years in the barrel, and then it goes into the bottles.
Yes.
And it ages in your Cistercian cellars for how many years?
Usually 8 years, 8.5 years. So you're even more, because we're now in 2009 and it's in 2020, so 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, a little less, so 9 years, because I'm sorry, I'm bad at math, but usually 9 years, 8 to 9 years. So it's a single parcel. It's the one that has the most Chardonnay of the whole range that we've tasted today. It's 55% Pinot Noir, because we like to think there's a little bit more Pinot Noir. This is how my grandmother planted this parcel in the 50s with 45% Chardonnay and 55% Pinot Noir. This parcel has the name of Grand Cendré because it burned down in 1836. It was a wood of a small forest, and then it completely burned. The village burned. If you come to the estate, you will see also traces of fire in our house. And this wood was transformed into sort of an ash field. So cinders, and cinders in French is cendré with a C, and there was a mistake in the book, and we don't know at what point it changed, but it's now written Grand Cendré with an S, because someone who wrote the name of the parcel turned it into an S. So it's the story of the Grand Cendré, and it's organic also. So 2009 we did not have the paper yet, so it was in conversion, but it's fully organic now, and it's an extra brut. It's 4 grams only, and aged a little bit in oak. So we want to find that elegance, balance, and yet the vinous style that defines Drappier. Usually you find that.
It's absolutely stunning. Absolutely stunning. And how long would you keep this for? The 2009, and I believe that both in Australia through United Cellars and in Singapore through Galliano Wine Family, the 2008 and 2009 vintages are available. So if we were to buy some of this to hold on to, how long would the 2009 and the 2008 be?
Both for a long time. So we're actually running out. We ran out of 2008 last year.
Ah.
We did manage to keep a little bit more for Galliena, who's just focusing on also 2008 has very, very high potential of aging because of how fresh it is. So I'd say '08 has a little bit more aging potential, but what I have in my glass has 15 years ahead of it. Yeah, there's no, to me, at least what I have in my glass has just so much freshness that you could keep, you're safe with keeping it at least 10 years. '08 might be one of those vintages that you can keep for 30 years. That's true. So '08, when we released it, tasted like a wine that was only 4 years old. You know, it was amazingly fresh. Some people found it a little bit too fresh, so too acidic or too fresh. But over the years, it will soften, and it's still already softened. But yeah, I love this '08, '09 that I have too in my glass because I don't get to drink '08 often.
Yeah. So 2009, 2008, probably similar yields. How many bottles of the Grand Cendré do you guys make, and how quickly do we need to buy it up before it runs out?
So we make 20,000 bottles every time we vintage, which is not every year. We did not vintage 2007, other vintages. So it usually, the one vintage runs out in a year and a half, depends. And it also depends on, because now it's organic, so it's a bit more dependent on the weather. So we've had difficulties in 2017. It will be a very, very small, it will not be vintage at all, actually, also, 2017. So yeah, we usually it's about a year, and it's not my job to say that, but I still say it. Grand Cendré is a prestige cuvée for quite an accessible price when you compare it to many large houses that will definitely put their price up on the prestige cuvée. And I like the Grand Cendré because it reflects all the artwork that we do at Drappier with still quite an accessible price.
And it's also, I think that I think it's important to notice that to mention that as a prestige cuvée, not only is it a prestige cuvée, but it's also a single vineyard, which is pretty rare in Champagne to find single vineyard champagnes. So pretty exceptional. I'm really glad we got to share this with you today. So an absolute pleasure. Now I have a few more questions. One is in regards to your super cool bottles. I don't know if you guys can see underneath the bottles. So not only are they lighter than other bottles, which make them better for the planet to transport, but they also have Champagne Drappier written on the bottom. So tell us a little bit about the shape of the bottle and this wonderful addition here on the bottom.
Yeah, so the addition is, well, it's different. It has many reasons why we did that. On the engraving was first to make the job easier in your cellar, in the retailer cellar, restaurant cellar, to already know whose bottle it is. From the bottom. So, and different reasons is if you age it for a long time and you lose the label, you will still be able to know it's a Drappier. And the third reason is that now we have our own bottle shape. We don't buy any wine. It's something that you may know. It's still very common in Champagne. The négoce, when you buy wines that's been made by someone else. This Drappier, we make everything. We've always made everything, but now you have a guarantee that that's been bottled, vinified, and bottled by Drappier. And now about the shape and the colors. So we designed a shape that has a more narrow neck than a normal champagne bottle, in order to gain a little bit of oxidation, less oxidation. So it's 15% less. The surface of wine in contact with the air it's 15% less than in a regular bottle of champagne. We put a darker glass, protects the wine better. And last but not least, so that's, I guess, our practical idea was to still have a diameter that was standard. So if you put it in a regular wine rack, it will fit. It will not be an odd-shaped bottle that you can only fit 3 bottles in a rack rather than 6. So I guess that's our very practical idea, to be able to stack them up on each other. So and obviously it's lighter. So it's now the Drappier bottle. My father drew it, and we patented it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Not only has it got the Magnum effect or something very close to it, but also it fits in the wine cellars, which if anyone's living in any kind of climate similar to Singapore or Queensland, you'll know that you definitely have to keep your wine in a cellar, because 32 degrees is not going to work.
Yeah.
For sure. Now, I could ask you a million other questions. I just got one last question for you, Charline. And it's a question that can be a little bit contentious with sommeliers, is to decant or not to decant? How do you feel about decanting champagne?
It's a very good question. We actually designed a special decanter for champagne that we're actually out of now. It's been a project that we led 5 or 10 years ago, I don't remember. That special decanter shape where it's round at the bottom, so it doesn't break the bubble. I believe that with all vintages, we could decant champagne. We should decant champagne, but people have to know that you will lose some bubbles on the way anyway. So people, or at least your clients, have to be ready to be, okay, we'll be more open, especially we're looking at older vintages. But it will, you will have less bubbles. What we tend to do at Drappier is actually just open the bottle before, especially with our most unusual wine, like Pinot, or less, or the ones with less sulfur, because strangely enough, very low sulfur champagnes sometimes have a reductive taste, which is kind of paradoxal, but it's what happens. So we tend to open those wines before, or advise people to let them settle in their glass. I do have the case with some of our champagnes that are a bit too reductive at the very beginning. Then it goes away fast. But with the decanter, the only problem is breaking the bubbles and keeping it cool at temperature. Which is why I wish I could show it to you now, but my father designed this very special bottle that was round shaped, and around the bowl it was put in a wood sort of bowl, so the wood would protect and would keep the wine fresh, because obviously unless you have a cooler that you could put your decanter in, you usually have a warmer champagne after a couple of minutes. But for older champagnes, I definitely recommend decanting it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it's been absolutely fascinating. I have a million questions more for you, but they'll have to wait. We would love to come and visit you in Champagne. That's not going to happen anytime this year. But in the meantime, what I'll do is I'll perhaps find, if you can send me an image of that decanter, and I'll send it out to everyone. And if anyone is interested in securing some of these champagnes, the Grand Cendré, the Claret d'Alice, the beautiful Brut Nature, Blanc de Noir, and of course the Quattro. You can of course get them through United Cellars in Australia, and also through Wine Family or Galliana in Singapore. I would highly recommend that you get them pretty quickly, especially the Grand Cendré and the limited edition wines, because they are wines that we're not going to find everywhere for sure. They are connoisseurs wines, of course, so do jump in and grab some of those. But if anyone has any more questions, as you can tell, I'm happy to talk about champagne for hours and hours and hours. So don't hesitate to send them through to me by email. And in any case, we'll stay in touch, and I will touch base with everyone with some of the things that we discussed this time. Charline, it's been an ultimate pleasure. It's been really, really lovely to chat. And hopefully we'll be able to chat again soon. Share some more.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. Thank you so much. I just saw, maybe it's too late to answer that, but a question about those varietals, if they're allowed in Champagne. And just a quick answer, they were just not pushed by the institutions, because they were confusing the message. They believed Champagne, it was simple, we had to put 3 main varietals and the rest was a bit on the side. But the 7 were always allowed since 1936. It's always been part of the book. But now growers and more people are making efforts in putting them a little bit more under the spotlight. So yeah, we're not going to produce Champagne that's forbidden, for sure. But
yeah. And you guys are going to have a pretty interesting harvest this year, because you have not only
this new perception of Champagne having
it's blocking. So you're going to have an amazing year. It looks like the conditions are really good, but a lower yield potentially because of economic impact.
Because of coronavirus. So we'll experience something new. I don't know if I'm excited or scared about what's going to happen, but we have an amazing conditions for the vine, and probably we'll have to keep and save some wine, and we won't be able to use it until we actually see that the situation of Champagne is getting better in terms of stocks. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted as to what happens at the end of August, because the harvest is being anticipated by 3 weeks almost, 2 weeks at least, compared to other years, because the spring was during lockdown. We had a fantastic weather, which everyone was at home, but the vine was thriving. So it's interesting contrast.
Everything will be early this year, it seems.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, I mean, the only way that we can help increase the potential yield authorized in Champagne is if we keep on popping bottles. So, ladies and gentlemen, keep on popping that Champagne. Support your grower Champagne, support your family-owned champagnes, and get your hands on some of these exquisite champagnes, because they're not many, and they're certainly sensational. So, worth looking out for. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Charline.
It's been a pleasure too. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for putting this up together to Galliana United Cellars, and I'm really happy to do this, even though it's in a distance. I wish I could visit you soon, but I see people wanting to come to Champagne. Please, when you can, visit us. It'd be our pleasure to welcome you.
Sounds good, and we'll clock our carbon neutral, our carbon footprint with you as well. Thank you, Charline. Have a beautiful afternoon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bonsoir.
Bye. Bonne soirée. Bonne journée.